all make sense. I mean, this is not unfamiliar territory for Spurs, who are used to welcoming French players, as we mentioned there.
Yes, very much. It's a really nice storyline. When you think about it, some 22 years ago, the Spurs selected a little-known French prospect named Tony Parker, who went on to mark history, not just for France, but certainly for the Spurs as part of a very winning franchise. And so the Spurs, the organization, the family that they have created around the organization, as well as basketball ops leadership, certainly have this track record of taking young international talent, nurturing it within their values, and creating very good players along the way, or turning excellent players into even better ones.
And we've seen that there, obviously, with, as stated, Tony Parker, Boris Diaw as well in there. Two Spurs champions. There's also a big link with their head coach. There's been a lot of praise for him. Just take a listen to this here.
Coaches are teachers, and we've been fortunate as an organization to have one of the greatest teachers regardless of sport, of all time. And to have the opportunity, we all learn from him each and every day. And for all of our players, that's an incredible opportunity.
Praise for Gregg Popovich there. He's the right head coach to welcome possibly then Wembanyama?
Very much so, or so the sentiment is. Certainly there's a lot of that sentiment here in France, that coach, that Pops is really the one to help Wembanyama into his next steps in the league. It's interesting in that Coach Popovich has this history and backstory, not just with French players, but others as well. And also we know has had some connection previously in the past with Wembanyama's current coach at Metz 92, Vincent Collet, who's also coach of the national team in France. And so there is mutual respect on both sides. What that relationship has been like over the past several months as Wembanyama has been playing and gearing up for this seminal moment coming up on his likely departure for the United States is anyone's guess, but we certainly know that on both sides that they have very similar interests in mind.
Yeah, there are those links there. The last time we had this much excitement was for LeBron James, let's say. Can you tell us, just knowing obviously the US, what is this excitement all about, Wembanyama coming finally to the US?
There's so much excitement in the United States about Wembanyama pretty much since Metz 92 went to Las Vegas back in October and played a pair of showcase games. A year ago, when I would tell people about my work on French basketball and its connections to the United States across both professional leagues as well as the NCAA, people would look at me as if I had 5 heads. That has changed significantly in the years since then, thanks to a lot of attention given to Wembanyama. There's a lot of intrigue and interest in his athletic abilities, obviously in his height, but also for his game IQ and how he handles the ball. Certainly the fact that the NBA has been broadcasting Wembanyama's pro games on its global platform, League Pass, since October, has provided viewers in the United States as well as around the world a more intimate look at what Wemby's game is like. And I had a group of my master's students from New York University in town last week, and we started off that week with the big Metz 92 game at Bercy, which was sold out. And across the board, my students who are used to the NBA, who are used to the spectacle, they just had stars in their eyes when they would see Wembanyama play and see what he could do on that terrain. And so I think that speaks a little bit to kind of the hype and the interest. Certainly it's kind of reached pitch fever right now.
It's quite interesting, isn't it? Because for us over here, this lottery system that we just saw some images of just there whilst you were speaking, it's quite unfamiliar for some, whereby the lowest ranked teams actually get to have the bigger players come in. You could wonder, if you don't know the process, whether this kind of maybe could hinder the potential of young talents like Wembanyama.
It could, but it really depends upon what teams and what markets. I think part of the maybe relief that went through a lot of different quarters overnight when the Spurs wound up with the number 1 lottery draft pick is that San Antonio is a far smaller media market than New York, than LA, than even Houston or Charlotte. And so it's likely that there will be a bit more of breathing room for him there. The last time a French player was selected so well, no one has been selected as high as number one. But you go back to 2017 when Frank Ntilikina was drafted by the New York Knicks in, I think, 8th place, which was then a high for a French player. He went directly into that New York media market, and while he was welcomed initially with very open arms, and there was a huge billboard of him on one of the buildings by Madison Square Garden, it's a very, very tough media market, especially for a young player, especially one who at that time he was still a teenager. So very much the San Antonio market, I think, will be an easier one for Wembanyama, not just the team itself and its experience, but also those within the larger basketball ecosystem there.
Yeah, and not just obviously good for only for Spurs over there, but basketball in the US and basketball globally as a whole. It's going to be some pretty crazy. We're going to have some pretty crazy weeks, obviously, to come, and also a next season which is going to be drafted around that whole Wemby mania, as they're calling it, whether it's from seen from here in France or over in the US. We can expect it to be pretty interesting, François. I'm sure we're going to follow it all.
All right. Well,
thank you
to both of you. We'll see.